Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Palo Alto, where we come to transform ourselves and each other and the world. Let's all unmute for a few moments to say hello and hear each other's voices.
Good morning, everyone.
Everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning,
everyone. Howdy.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I like it.
Oh, I like
I
that.
love
Someone
Good
is
morning.
singing.
Who's
Sounds like
singing
someone's
that?
in a
That's
good
great.
mood.
Okay. You can see the order of service by following the link that you'll see in the chat. Please note the early bird town hall meeting following today's service, where you can hear from our Vice President of Finance, Kevin Crane, about how the pandemic has affected UUCPA's finances and what we might expect for the next fiscal year. Return to the main meeting room on Zoom at 11:45. He'll present for 10 minutes, and then your questions are welcome. Many other events today and in the coming week are also listed there in your order of service. And now, let us begin our service. We light our chalice with words from the late Reverend Laurel Sheridan. Take from life its coals, not its ashes. Fan the flames of love and justice. Join hands and hearts in common endeavor, and there will be no limit to what we can achieve together. With our centering words each week, we draw on the many sources of our living tradition. Today's words are from Jorge Luis Borges. Cualquier destino, por largo y complicado que sea, consta en realidad de un solo momento, el momento en que el hombre sabe para siempre quién es. Any life, no matter how long and complex it may be, is in reality made up of a single moment, the moment in which the man knows forevermore who he is. As we follow the sound of the bell into silence, let us become centered and fully present in this place together. Please join in as Bruce leads us in singing, "Oh, I Woke Up This Morning." The words are on the screen and in the order of service.
I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I was walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I was singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Going back in Sharpie's time machine again? Yeah, she promised to show me more protests from the past. Just watch out your fur doesn't get stuck on the duct tape. Sharpie, can you show me a protest that's not so far in the past? In 2011, Occupy Oakland protesters set up tents in front of Oakland City Hall to protest against unfair conditions for 99% of all Americans. The top 1% of Americans kept getting richer, while everyone else was losing money. Did they sleep in those tents? Yes, they set up a real community. They welcomed homeless people to join them. They started gardens, and they had a library where people could borrow books. People of all races and genders joined their movement. It looks like a kind of nice place to live. They ran everything by democratic process. On November 2nd, they organized a general strike in Oakland. They shut down the Port of Oakland to support the workers in the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. Those people weren't getting paid enough, but the owners of big businesses kept getting richer. That's not fair. I know. Then on December 12th, Occupy Oakland joined together with other protesters up and down the West Coast. They shut down the Port of Oakland again, demanding better pay for the people working there. It seems like you shouldn't have to protest to get paid enough. A century ago, it was worse than that. Big businesses made people work 12 hours a day. Children had to work in factories. And there were no paid vacations. It was only by protesting that people got 8-hour days, paid vacations, and no child labor. What happened to Occupy Oakland? The city of Oakland got tired of them. So they sent in police to chase everyone away. They tore up the gardens and threw out the library books. Are things getting better for working people now? Unfortunately, no. During the pandemic, even though rich people are getting richer, they don't want to pay fair wages to ordinary people. So, the protests didn't work? They helped, but you have to do more than protest. You have to organize. I learned that protests stopped child labor and got people paid vacations. That's good. I like vacations. I also learned that protesting isn't enough. You have to organize. Dude, you hate organizing. I'll just have to learn, I guess. Sharpie's gonna show me one more protest next week.
We now turn our thoughts to the important events of our lives, which we wish this community to share. If you have a joy or a sorrow you would like me to speak this morning, please post them in the chat box provided by Zoom, and they will be shared aloud. As a way to grieve and remember the toll of COVID, as we begin, we hear the story of one person who has died. Shirley Marlene Lemke Virus, yes, that was her last name, died last week in Orange County at the age of 88. Known as Marlene, she was a public health nurse and then a school nurse for the county. She and her husband Dale were married for 66 years, and she is mourned by him, their 2 sons, a daughter-in-law, and 4 grandchildren. Marlene had Parkinson's and dementia, and then the coronavirus complicated matters and brought her life to an end. Those who knew her well speak of her kindness, honesty, and generosity. We cannot possibly speak all the names of everyone who has died this week, much less the almost 500,000 people who have died in our country alone. But we can remember a few people, one by one, and hear their stories. Marlene Virus. Here in our own community, though not connected to COVID, we light a candle as well for the life of Emmy Hester. Emmy was active at UUCPA for the past several years. The members of her women's group, book group, and forum grew worried when she was not seen for several weeks and learned that she was hospitalized for a stroke and died on December 1st. We will miss her sense of humor and her wisdom. If her daughter plans a memorial service, I will let you know. Oh, let us now take a few moments of silent prayer or meditation to hold all that we have heard with compassion and care. Blessed be. Let's all join in as Bruce leads us in singing Rank by Rank.
four winds gathered hither, loud the hallowed walls entreat. Whence we come, and how, and whither, from their stillness breaking clear, echoes wake to warn or cheer. Higher truth from saint and seer, call to us assembled here. Ours the year's memorial store, honored days and names we reckon, days of comrades gone before, lives that speak and deeds that beckon, from the dreaming of the night to the labors of the day, shines their everlasting light, guiding us upon our way. Though the path be hard and long, still we strive in expectation. Join we now their ageless song, one with them in aspiration, one in name, in honor, one. Guard we well the crown they won, what they dreamed be ours to do. Hope their hopes and seal them true.
Our reading this morning is from the Short History of the 504 Sit-In by Kitty Cohn. At every moment, we felt ourselves the descendants of the civil rights movement of the 60s. We learned about sit-ins from the civil rights movement. We sang freedom songs to keep up morale and consciously show the connection between the two movements. We always drew the parallels. About public transportation, we said, we can't even get on the back of the bus. A high point was African-American civil rights activist Julian Bond's visit to the building. Inspiring is a label people with disabilities tend to despise. Time after time, they are told by able-bodied people that they are inspiring just for doing the ordinary tasks of life, taking care of their children, supporting themselves and their families with a job, graduating from college, leaving the house. You can see how this grates on a person's nerves. For one thing, it betrays an assumption that disabled people are usually incapable of ordinary tasks. I think we can all understand this if we imagine ourselves receiving such comments. If I rescue someone from a burning building, go ahead and tell me how amazing I am. But if you're amazed when you see me tie my shoes, then it's clear your expectations of me must have been pretty low. For another, a subtext of "you're so inspiring" is often, "it's strange to be happy while still being disabled." If someone thinks a person with a disability is inspiring just for going about daily life, then it seems like they think it would be, or should be, so awful to have that disability that they can't imagine carrying on. That's not a very nice thing to say to someone. And also, no one likes to be reduced to one characteristic. It's objectifying. A disability is just one among dozens of important aspects of a person, and when able-bodied people give so much attention to it, it's as if they see only that, not the person at all. The "you're so inspiring" phenomenon is so widely recognized and disdained by people with disabilities that there's a shorthand for it. Inspiration porn. I'm laying all this out there so that you'll know what I mean and what I don't mean when I say that the disability liberation movement is incredibly inspiring. The disabled people who have exercised their rights, brought about greater recognition of those rights, and continue to expand them inspire me, not because they're so amazing considering they have disabilities, blech, but because they are amazing people, period. They know so much about how to organize, how to sustain a struggle, how to protest injustice, and forge better ways. Anyone who wants to make this world a better place can learn a lot from these activists. In a word, they are leaders. So today, I want to share a couple stories from the fight for disability rights. This sermon was scheduled for January 17th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day weekend, but I fell ill this morning. Theda, who was the worship associate, noted the irony of my being temporarily disabled. It's true, my disability was very short-lived, but a disability is often defined as a condition that limits a person's ability to engage in a major life activity. And I had a condition that kept me from working. My employer provided accommodation. Well done. If you missed the service too, please do look it up on our website or YouTube channel so that you can see Theda's reflection and other parts of the service. Today's is all new. Anyway, the point is we scheduled this topic for the MLK weekend because the parallels and influences of these two movements for civil rights are powerful. In 1973, Congress passed and President Nixon signed the Rehabilitation Act. In some ways, it was a simple extension of a 50-year-old law. But Section 504 was like an acorn embedded in that law. It provided that any program or activity that received financial assistance from the federal government had to be open to all otherwise qualified people, regardless of disability. This was a turning point. It made disability a matter of civil rights. And when people with disabilities began to cite Section 504 and insist on its enforcement, that acorn grew and grew and split the foundation of exclusion that had oppressed people with disabilities for our country's entire history. Public schools receive federal funding, so do universities, and mass transit systems, and public housing developments. Until the passage of Section 504, it was legal for a school to say, we don't have a teacher who can handle your intellectual disability, we can't educate you. It was legal for bus drivers to refuse a ride to a person who couldn't climb the stairs to get in. It was legal for a federally funded apartment building or university building to have no ramps or elevators. The nation's infrastructure had been designed for those without disabilities, the temporarily able-bodied, as we are often called. Now, it had to change. It quickly became clear that that change was going to cost a lot of money, and the government balked at actually creating the regulations that the law required. President Carter, who had promised to do so, instead punted to his Secretary of Housing, Education, and Welfare, Hugh, Joseph Califano. Califano wanted to keep the law toothless. In April of 1977, 4 years after Section 504 became law, its promise was still unfulfilled. But disabled folks had been organizing, and on April 5th, they held sit-ins at the 8 regional offices of Hugh all around the country. Kitty Cohn, a Bay Area organizer, whose words you heard earlier, wrote, "A broad cross-disability coalition began building for a rally on April 5th, knowing we'd sit in afterwards. We set up committees to take on different tasks, such as rally speakers, media, fundraising, medics, monitors, publicity, and outreach. The outreach committee was very successful in garnering broad community support from churches, unions, civil rights organizations, gay groups, elected politicians, radical parties, and others." After the rally, the protesters entered the federal building and climbed to the regional director's office on the 4th floor. No elevators. He made no promises to enact Section 504, so they refused to leave. They were there for 26 days, by far the longest of any of the 8 sit-ins. And one thing that made it possible here in San Francisco was the network of community support they had created. Cohn wrote, "The International Association of Machinists facilitated our sending a delegation to Washington. Politicians sent mattresses and a shower hose to attach to the sink. Glide Memorial Church and the Black Panther Party sent many delicious meals that nourished us between days of coffee and donuts." And they didn't just sit. They analyzed their media coverage, trained spokespeople, called news conferences. The FBI cut off the phones, but the activists made their own ways of communicating directly with the world outside. Deaf members of the community signed out the window to people across the street and exchanged messages about what was happening in the building and what the responses were in the press and the government. Without a refrigerator, it was hard to keep food for long or keep medicines stable, but one of the activists knew his stuff. He ran tubing from an office air conditioner, and with just that and the materials on hand, created a makeshift fridge. The sit-in was entirely peaceful, but it disrupted the business of the department, not just in San Francisco, but back in Washington. All eyes were on this one federal building and the people who would not leave until the government followed its own laws. Finally, In response to the sit-in and the delegation sent to Washington, D.C., the administration gave in and Section 504 became a reality at last. Throughout this action and many others in the 1970s, as Kitty Cohn said, the movement for the rights of people with disabilities hearkened to the civil rights movement of just 10 and 20 years before. They carried signs that said, "We shall overcome." And as Kitty Cohn said, signs that said, "We can't even sit in the back of the bus." They rewrote a civil rights anthem with words about Section 504 and the Carter administration, reusing the refrain, "Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on." They used techniques like sit-ins and street actions that had served African Americans and their allies. And people like the Reverend Cecil Williams and his Glide Memorial Church and the members of the Black Panther Party recognized their siblings in struggle, recognized that this was another chapter in the same book, compelling the United States to keep the promises implicit in its ideals and include those who had been shut out. But disabled people's liberation movement did not begin only after the civil rights movement. For as long as they had been regarded with derision, disgust, or at best pity, they had responded with self-respect and perseverance, insisting on their dignity and equality. In the 1930s, for example, as the country strove to emerge from the Great Depression, people with disabilities saw that they were going to be sent to the back of the line or left out altogether. Programs such as the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, were being set up to put people back to work. But when people with disabilities came to the Emergency Relief Bureau asking for WPA jobs, the Bureau wouldn't refer them. Half a dozen New York City residents responded by forming the League of the Physically Handicapped in 1935. At the League's zenith, it had several hundred members. Their first action was a sit-in. They eventually won the creation of 1,500 jobs for New Yorkers with disabilities. I don't know whether those who sat in at Woolworth's were aware of this precursor to their strategy, but the thread runs back through both liberation movements. Like the struggle for African American civil rights, the disability rights movement has been led with intelligence, creativity, perseverance, shrewdness, community building, humor, and song. Both compelled a nation to recognize their rights as human rights. Before 504, disability was defined as a medical issue, but with Section 504, that imperfect and never fully realized law, and with 1990's Americans with Disabilities Act, for which it paved the way, disability was understood at last as a matter of civil rights. It wasn't a flaw in the people that caused the problem. It was a flaw in the country that denied their rights and their full humanity. As Judy Heumann, one of the leaders of the movement for 504 and still today, says, "We are not the ones who need to change." Like African Americans who declared, as immortalized in the title of a 1970 civil rights documentary, "I am somebody." People with disabilities have had to insist upon their somebodyness against a legal system, education system, medical system that would not acknowledge their full humanity. They were dismissed as subhuman, regarded as malformed monsters who had to be hidden from view by the so-called ugly laws that governed many cities and entire states for a century. And gradually and reluctantly, seen instead as objects of pity. But chanting, I am somebody, people with disabilities have claimed their personhood and their power. And like all liberation movements, both of these have made not just their obvious constituents, but everyone more free. In the case of disability rights, one reason is that a full 25% of us are disabled, according to the Centers for Disease Control. And as we age, we are more and more likely to have a disability. Until by age 90, almost all of us have significant disabilities of cognition, hearing, mobility, and/or vision. If we live long, we will almost certainly leave the ranks of the able-bodied and benefit from the equality and freedom for which the disability rights movement has fought so hard. But there is another sense in which activists for disability rights have freed us all. They have broadened our society, which used to put potential leaders like Judy Heumann and Kitty Cohn into institutions. They have given us the gifts that we would have denied ourselves. Disabled people have always proclaimed their own power. It was not hard to fill our service with great words and music written by people with disabilities again today, as we did on the 17th. Because Tchaikovsky and Beethoven, Laurel Sheridan and Teresa Soto, Jorge Luis Borges and Robert Hensel have all fought free of the limits that a callous, condescending world has tried to impose. But how many others have fought and still lost? How many voices never emerged from the prisons masquerading as schools and hospitals? How many have died at the hands of police who attacked what they feared and could not understand? These are immeasurable losses, not just for these people and their families, but for everyone. Here too, we have a long way to go. But in disabled, disability rights activists, we have amazing leaders to guide us. In the relational covenant of this congregation, we say, we accept responsibility for making our community all that we want it to be. It is because of that responsibility, gladly accepted, that many members and friends, in addition to their annual pledges, may choose to give an additional contribution during our service. It is our reminder to ourselves that there's no one here but us chickens. We make the decisions that govern this congregation. We choose its ministers, staff, and lay leaders. We fund its vision. The order of service gives a QR code and link, and also information on using text to give via Give Lively. If you are visiting for the first time, you are our guest. Please just enjoy Veronica's music as our gift to you. Thank you. Please join in as Bruce leads us in singing Break Not the Circle.
Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not that circle, make it wider still, till it includes, embraces all the living. Come wonder at this love that comes to life, where words of freedom are with humor spoken, and people keep no score of wrong and guilt, but will that human bonds remain unbroken. Join then the movement of the love that frees, till people of whatever race or nation will truly be themselves, stand on their feet, see eye to eye with laughter and elation.
I want to leave you with the words of poet Glennis Redmond. Make no apologies for yourself, because you are covered by a listening skin, because every ache you feel is not your own, because you ask questions of the universe, so the world opens before you like a page of text, because the river flows with stories, because you sit on the shore and listen. Let us go from here, aching, asking, listening. Amen. Please stay after the benediction for our virtual coffee time. You'll be invited to small group conversations in our breakout rooms, or you can stay here in the main room with me to discuss the service. Then at 11:45, we'll begin our brief town hall meeting. Please unmute yourself, turn on your video, view in gallery view, and extend your hands as if to reach into the people in the Zoom windows next to you while we say our benediction together. Go out into the world, be of good courage, hold fast good, turn no one evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak,
Suffering.
rejoice in beauty, love word and deed, honor
Honor all
Amen.